All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Dave, me, and Nick, will be doing a preview and prediction for the 2022 New Orleans Bowl. 8-point line in favor of South Alabama. 54.5 is the over-under. Wednesday, December 21st, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. And then USA won the only matchup in 20. Looking at this Western Kentucky offense, Nick, this is going to be a much different-looking offense with Austin Reed, who was a phenomenal impact transfer for the Hilltoppers. No longer there. It's out now to two freshmen backups in Veltkamp and Turner. We don't know which one's going to get the start, but they're both true freshmen. Whoever gets it will be making their first career start for Western Kentucky. And they're behind an offensive line that's not been great. 124th in college football in sacks allowed, which is not great, especially when you consider this system. 36 points per game, 483 yards per game. They really air it out. Pretty efficient on the ground as well with Pondexter and Wobachek. I think the biggest part of this offense, though, that certainly gives them a chance in this game, regardless of who's quarterback, is this receiving core. Jalen Hall, he was also a transfer from Western Michigan, 731 yards on 59 grabs for him. Dawood Davis, 63 receptions, 872 yards. And then to top things off, Malachi Corley, 90 grabs, 1,179 yards, and a team high 9 touchdowns. Everything else about this offense coming into this game does not look too great because, again, Reed out. Offensive line's really struggled this year. But how do you think about this receiving core, Nick? What do you think they're going to be able to do to keep them in this game here against a very good South Alabama defense?
This is a very good offense that has had a good year so far. Austin Reed certainly plays a big role in that. 35.8 points per game, 483.3 yards per game on offense. This is a solid offense top to bottom. It certainly helps the wide receiving core they have. Corley, Davis, Hall, all these guys are super talented. And it's been great having a quarterback that can kind of reach them. Will the true freshman quarterback that starts be able to do that? I certainly hope so. I do like the weapons being able to help him. You look at Corley, 90 receptions, over 1,100 yards on the season, 9 touchdowns for him. Davis has 7 scores, 872 yards. Hall has 5 scores, 731 yards. They certainly have a lot of talent, and it's also not a bad running back room either. They have good balance there with Poindexter and Wobachek. These two guys, they share the touches a little bit. Poindexter has a little bit more, but they each have close to 500 yards on the ground, plus 3 scores. So there's a lot of balance there. I think Veltkamp will get the nod at quarterback. I think he has the better opportunity here. He's the one that's listed first on the depth chart. But obviously that comes down to the coach, and certainly could be a game-time decision to see how they do in practice. That leaves a lot of question marks for me for this offense. How is that going to be? That's a huge question mark. That's why I think a lot of folks could maybe look towards picking South Alabama for this game. But it's certainly interesting to see what they can do with the talent they have at wide receiver. That's not a bad wide receiving core to have if you're being thrown into a game as a true freshman.
Veltkamp, crazy size, 6'5", 220. That's just perfect. That's exactly the type of size you want. And so I think that's certainly going to give him a leg up. And, despite the struggles of this offensive line, Gunnar Britton, a tackle, he's had a phenomenal year for them. Looking at the South Alabama offense, Carter Bradley, it's really a unit made up of transfers. Bradley from Toledo has been great, 64% completion percentage, 2,974 yards, 25 touchdowns, 10 picks. And then Damian Webb from Florida State, 1,017 yards, 13 touchdowns. This is an offense that played UCLA early on in the year, and they led that game for the majority of it. They lost on a buzzer-beating field goal by the Bruins, but, that's just one of 2 losses, another one being a 6-10, snooze fest against Troy, where that defense, obviously everyone knows how good they are, completely held them in check. For the most part, though, this unit is good. Back-to-back games with 27 points. Before that, they had 38 each in the 2 games prior. So this is a very consistent unit we're seeing here, Nick, and it starts with that balance, mainly from Webb in the backfield. And then you look at the pass catchers I have. Jalen Wayne, 56 grabs, 794 yards, 9 touchdowns. Colin Lacey, 58 for 755 and 6 more touchdowns. And then Devin Vosen, 53 receptions for 714 yards. Both of these teams have 3, if they have a trio of pass catchers that have, pretty good production, 700-plus yards from all 6 pass catchers on 2 different teams. Western Kentucky, obviously a really good offense. Their quarterback is out. For South Alabama, looks like they're going to be a fully healthy unit here. When it comes to the tail of the tape, which offense you leaning with here?
I certainly would like to take the Jaguars in this one in terms of offense. I like this offense. I like the talent here. 31.9 points per game, 424.7 points per game on offense. This is not a bad offense that has been historically getting better. They produced an NFL draft pick last year with Jalen Tolbert, who was taken out of South Alabama. So certainly there is a lot of talent coming through this program. They are attacking the portal hard and bringing in recruits. Bradley, brought him in from Tulsa. Fantastic year, nearly 3,000 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 64.3% completion percentage. Great quarterback, has great command of the field. Good eye, good vision. I really love what he can do. Damian Webb, fantastic back, almost 200 touches, 1,000 yards on the ground, 5.1 yards per carry, plus 13 scores for him. Really leading the way here. I like what he can do. He definitely produces on the ground. Braylon McReynolds as well is not a terrible backup. He hasn't got a whole lot of touches this year, but he does have solid production, 5.7 yards per carry. And the wide receiving core is great as well. Jalen Wayne, fantastic wide receiver, near 800 yards receiving, plus the 9 scores. Cullen Lacey having a great year, 750 yards, and the 6 scores for him. Devin Volson, 714 yards. A trio there with over 300 yards, 700 yards is so impressive. I like the way they're able to spread the ball out. They have multiple different targets they can hit. They have different kind of ways to do this. They got Wayne at the X, Volson at the Z, Lacey at the H. They have definitely a great balance there. I like this offense top to bottom. I'm very impressed with it. Certainly struggle against the Troy defense, but that defense is fantastic. So there really is nothing to take away negatively from that, in my opinion. I think that's just a great Troy defense. We talked about them earlier in Bowl Mania. This is a great offense that has real potential here to put up a good day.
Now, looking at the Western Kentucky defense, there's something about the Hilltoppers when, it comes to playing with intensity. Last year, they were one of the nation's best at recording interceptions. This year, 17 of them. That's, en route to first in FBS with 30 takeaways. These guys love to steal the football. And they're not too weak in any particular area. I'd say they're not that great against the run, but again, the secondary, I think, kind of overcompensates things. They're very good, 225 yards per game allowed. Of course, their ball hawking is second to none in college football. Plenty of guys here to get involved. I think linebacker JaQues Evans, though, 11.5 tackles for loss for him, 100-plus tackles. He's been great. 8 sacks as well. Derek Smith, another 90 tackles and 6 tackles for loss. And you just look at the production from these defensive backs. It's pretty, absurd. You look at a guy in Khalif Halisi, 10 pass breakups for him. Davion Williams has 5 pass breakups. These defensive backs, I don't know what they do here, Nick. They really seem to coach him up. Caleb Oliver's had a really good year as a run defender from his safety spot. This is not a bad defense by any means. I'm very interested to see how they play here against this phenomenal rushing attack of South Alabama, considering they've not been too good over the last month and a half against the run. I think it's certainly a weaker spot for them. And they've also had their struggles against the pass as well. I don't think these numbers are skewed by any means, but they've certainly had their fair share of struggles, especially when they're on the field a lot longer. And that's certainly, one of the drawbacks to having this explosive offense they have that moves in a hurry. They've played over 70 snaps in a numerous amount of games this year, including their last time out against FAU where they won by a point in overtime. So this is going to be an interesting game for this Western Kentucky defense. I certainly think they can hold, but I think, looking how the run defense this year, they've just not been very consistent. And if I had to guess, they're going to struggle here against Webb.
I agree. I think this, running defense is not fantastic, but it's not terrible by any means. They certainly aren't they give up 156.3 yards per game on the ground. Really not the number you want to see, but it's not too terrible considering some other teams we've covered so far this bowl season. I love the way they get after the ball with the interceptions, 17 interceptions. It's not like they have one player kind of pushing that number up. Stout and Oliver both have 3 leading the team total together, but Haseen Smith, Haseen has 2, Smith has 1. Kendrick Simpsons has another interception. Juwan Jones has 1. So they certainly spread it out. They got a bunch of different guys here that get after the ball. Haseen, leading the way with the 10 pass breakups, plus the 3 sacks for him. He's been kind of doing everything this year, 6'3" total tackles. Really impressed with him at defensive back. JaQues Evans, leading the way, 101 tackles, 8 sacks, 4 pass breakups, 2 fumbled recoveries, and returned one of those for a touchdown. Very talented linebacker. Love how he commands the defense. Great leader. The 62 total tackles leading the way. Solid numbers from him. Derek Smith, 89 total tackles, 3 sacks, plus the interception and the 2 pass breakups. He also has a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. They get a lot of turnovers. I love the turnover margins for this team. They force turnovers like nobody's business, which is a really great thing to see for this defense. They have a lot of guys who have productions on the defensive line as well. They got 2 tackles in Hernandez and Martin. They each got 1.5 sacks, 33 total tackles for Hernandez, 30 for Martin. This is a solid team, top to bottom on defense. It's not going to blow you away, but if you look at the actual numbers, it is very impressive if you dig into it, certainly with the turnover margin. And I like the way this defense could potentially operate against the South Alabama offense.
Now looking at the Jaguar defense, 16th in college football in fewest plays, because I just mentioned Western Kentucky, they're on the field a lot. South Alabama is not. And that's probably because they're really good on third down, both in college football, 30% conversion rate allowed by opponents. And they're also very stout against the run. That is one number that's not skewed one bit. They've only allowed 130 rushing yards or more in 2 games this year. A win over Louisiana Lafayette, and then 144 and a 1-point win over UCLA. I mean, that's one of the top rushing attacks in college football, and they held them to 144. So I don't think they're a fluke one bit. This is a team that really gets into the backfield. Wycavius Thomas, Maurice Strong, 2 guys up front that really lead the way for them. This is just top to bottom, Nick, a really good unit. It really starts with this front 7. Trey Kaiser, 10 tackles for loss. CJ Raya has the same number for him from his outside linebacking position. Brock Higdon's been very productive. Jamie Sheriff, another 7.5 tackles for loss. I mean, they're very deep in this front 7. 28 sacks. That's probably one of the better numbers in college football. And then you also have a top-end corner in Yam Banks in the back end. He's been one of the best in college football this year. 5 interceptions, 10 pass breakups for him. Also has 45 tackles. He's potentially maybe a transfer candidate to potentially get, a boost up to one of the bigger schools. We'll see what happens with that later on. I also like Jaden Voisin from his safety position. He's been very good. It's just been a very well-coached defense. Kane Womack, of course, a very good defensive coordinator coming over from Indiana a couple years back, and they're really putting it together on this side of the ball. And that's a big reason why they've won so many games this year, because their offense, the transfers they've picked up, have really blended well with some of the veterans. And same thing here with this defense. They're really picking things up, Nick. I think this is a great football team. And, the defense will probably get overlooked because of the production on offense, but I think it's certainly probably going to make an impact in this game.
Great defense, great balance. I really like what they can do on the field. 88.7 yards per game given up on the ground is a ridiculously low number. I love this number. This run defense is fantastic. Volson at safety, solid guy, 76 tackles, 5 pass breaks, 2 picks for him. Great leader on the defense. Kaiser, 71 total tackles, 2 sacks for him. Miller, another linebacker, 2.5 sacks, 63 total tackles. They really have a fantastic front seven that can get after the quarterback. I love the numbers here. Jamie Sheriff on the defensive line, the 6 sacks is very impressive, plus the 40 tackles for him. Yam Banks, fantastic year. Certainly a transfer candidate, in my opinion. I think he can find himself in a great spot in a Power 5 team with the 5 interceptions and 45 tackles for him. There's a lot of balance here. I love his linebacking core. Keyshawn Brown, CJ Rise, these guys are lower on the tackles list, but they're solid as well. Rise has 4 sacks on the season, plus 32 total tackles for him. I love this defense. I think they're fantastic. They get after the ball. They really stuff the run. I think it's very impressive, and it can help when you have a freshman quarterback who's not comfortable, kind of throwing him into his first game here, and he can kind of struggle against this defense that can kind of smother the run and force the young quarterback to make plays that he doesn't want to make.
Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction on this game, I think keys to the contest, Western Kentucky, got to get that young quarterback comfortable, expected to be Higdon camp, and then to continue to force turnovers. That's going to be the biggest way to help out any struggles on offense they may have. For South Alabama, good effort from this defensive line like you have all year long. CB duo has been a fun matchup, Yam Banks and Darrell Luther. Win it more often than not, and I think they will, and I think they'll also maintain that balance. Austin Reed, I wish he was playing in this game. And even though he's not, I think Western Kentucky, especially in the first half, their offense, they're certainly going to make some big plays. I think those pass catchers, this is a great defense they're playing, so I think they're certainly going to stand tall, a time or two in the red zone. And I think the second half, they're certainly going to take over on offense. I'm going to take South Alabama 38-24. You're taking them by a pretty lengthy margin as well. I know it's only a 4-point difference, but I think this offense for Western Kentucky is certainly going to do a little bit better than it looks like you're anticipating.
I just think they're going to struggle, and the freshman quarterback will make a few mistakes. I really think that you get thrust into a position like this, you're bound to make some mistakes. It is a difficult matchup, especially against that secondary that is really solid. The cornerback duo is fantastic. So I really think that's certainly something that concerns me with this Western Kentucky offense. So I'm going to go a little more conservative, but this is a good matchup. Western Kentucky certainly has potential to make some big plays here, but I think South Alabama just has too much talent and too much continuity on the offense to really make this a close contest. I think it might be close at halftime, but I think South Alabama finds a way to pull away late. We've also seen over the years, plenty of unsung heroes, though, so I would not be that shocked if, a young quarterback here for Western Kentucky steps up and has a big game, even though it is against this defense. That would probably shock me for sure in this go-around, but most of the time, probably not. That's me for today's episode, guys. Nick, as always, thank you for joining me. Yeah, thank you so much. This is a bowl game I'm actually really excited for. It's one of my favorite ones on the slate. I think this is 2 teams that have a great balance on offense and defense. I think this is a lot of storylines to look at. Fun matchup in New Orleans early on in bowl season, towards the middle on a Wednesday night. I think this will be a fun one to watch.
Agree with that. That's me for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.